Hi everyone, happy Mother's Day. We are happy to welcome you to SOFO's new Zoom programming. We know how important it is to stay connected to the natural world, so we're happy to provide these opportunities for you safely at home. My name is Rachel Speckenbach. I'm an environmental educator here at the museum, and today my program will be focusing on animal mothers of the South Fork. So before we get started, I'd just like to ask you all to please make sure that your microphones are muted, just so that we can avoid any background interference. And if you have any questions throughout my program, please feel free to ask them in the chat box below. We will have other SOFO staffers there available, and then I will have time to get to your questions at the end of my program. So today's program will be a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to share my screen with you and we'll get started momentarily. So being that it's Mother's Day, I found it only appropriate that I focus on animal mothers of the South Fork today. Depending on the animal, we'll learn that they all take care of their young in different ways. Some parents provide parental care after their babies come into the world, while others do not at all. Regardless, all of our animal mothers do their absolute best to provide their children optimal opportunity to survive and thrive in the wild. So first, we'll learn about some mammal mothers. So we're mammals. And so are the other animals that we see here. So we have the white-tailed deer on the top left with her fawn. Over on the right, we have the native white-footed mouse and pictures of what her babies would look like when they're born. And then down below, we have a pair of raccoons. So just about all mammal mothers give live birth, and their young generally require a significant amount of parental care up to adulthood. Their young can be born precocial or altricial, and these two words refer to developmental stages at birth. So our precocial young are more developed, they can function on their own, they generally feed themselves, and they can even walk around on their own a few hours after birth. So we will see this in our white-tailed deer. Our altricial young are less developed, and they rely entirely on their parent for survival. So we see this in humans, and we also see this in our white-footed mouse, pictured up top. So the babies are born without any fur, their eyes are closed, their ears are closed, they rely entirely on their parent. Something that all mammal mothers do, however, have in common, regardless of other factors, is that they nurse their young. So they will feed their young through milk production. So I've chosen some native animals to highlight in the next few slides that you've likely seen out here before. Our first is the red fox, and I just thought they were important to highlight because we can kind of relate them to ourselves and that they have complex social family structures. So our fox couples are typically monogamous and will form long-term pair bonds, meaning that they will stay together for multiple breeding seasons. A pair bond will reproduce only once a year in the spring, and they will live in dens underground, and that's where they will raise their families. Their gestation period, which is the amount of time that a mother will carry her babies, is approximately a month and a half to 2 months long. She will then birth an average of 4 to 6 pups, which are also called kits. And they are born covered in hair, but otherwise helpless in that they are blind. They can't hear, and they're born without any teeth. So we would consider them altricial young. So the fox mother will stay with her pups for the next few weeks to keep them warm and safe in the den. And because she is with them this entire time, the father will hunt and bring her food in the den. So in the den, the mother will then nurse her young for the next 6 to 7 weeks and as they develop. And as they grow a little bit bigger, they'll start to come in and out of the den. So we do see that in this bottom picture here. Their family structure is maintained like this up until the fall. And that's when young will generally start to go off on their own to establish territory. But that doesn't always happen. And especially females will sometimes stay within a close distance to her parents and even assist with next year's litter. So she will, just like the father, also bring her mother food in the den while she's raising next year's pups. And then both the older siblings and the parents will participate in grooming, playing with, and guarding the newborn kits. So red-tailed foxes are sometimes seen denning under houses and porches. So considering that they don't cause too much harm and you have them at your house, it's a pretty cool opportunity to see these families grow and play. Next up, we have the Virginia possum. The Virginia possum, I think, is very special because it is our only marsupial found north of Mexico, and we're lucky enough to have it here on the South Fork. So what is a marsupial? A marsupial is a mammal who has young that are born incompletely developed and must make their way up to their mother's pouch on her stomach, and that's where they will nurse and continue to grow. So possums are known for their bad reputations, but I think that they're incredibly interesting animals, and they also make pretty cool mothers. So the female possum typically breeds and gives birth to her young between February and June, so right about now. And she will have anywhere from 1 to 3 litters per year. And during the mating season, males will make clicking sounds to attract female possums. But unlike our fox families, after the possums breed, the female is on her own to raise the young. So marsupial young develop for a very, very short time within the body. So in the case of this possum species, it's only about 13 days. So she will then give birth to highly undeveloped young. They're really tiny. They're about the size of a dime. And while they are developing inside the mother during this 13 days, they developed very strong forelimbs so that they can pull themselves up their mother's fur and into her pouch on her stomach. So at this time, they can't see, they can't hear, they don't have any fur. They don't even really have developed back legs. They really just have those strong forelimbs so they can make their journey up to her pouch. So mom can give birth to anywhere from 20 to 30 joeys. But she's only able to nurse about 13 of them at one time, unfortunately. But then this will then average in about 8 to 9 joeys. And joeys, that's another name for her babies. She'll have an average of 8 to 9 joeys nursing, and they will continue to develop in her pouch for the next 2.5 months. At that time, when they get a little too big for her pouch, they'll then climb up onto her back like we see in this picture here. And she will carry them on her back until they're about 4 or 5 months old, and then they'll start to go off on their own. So this next picture here is a close-up of her pouch and the baby possums or the joeys inside. They're very, very small, like I said, so they're probably about 13, 14, 15 days old here. On that top joey, you can see that his forelimb is developed, but otherwise they can't see, they can't hear, and they don't have any fur. So next up, we have our reptile and our amphibian mothers. So our reptile and amphibian mothers are very different from our mammal mothers in that they don't generally provide parental care. And instead of giving live birth, they will lay eggs in what they deem to be a safe place, and then they will usually leave them on their own to hatch later on. So mother reptiles will lay their eggs on land, and their eggs have a tough leathery shell which allows them to pass oxygen and hold in moisture, and then that leathery shell can also stretch a bit so the baby can grow inside. When they hatch, these babies will then look like tiny adults. So they're born with everything they need to survive on land. And they have everything that a reptile would have. So they have claws and they have scales. And then in the case of a turtle, they would have their shells and their beaks as well. When it comes to our amphibian mothers, they will lay jelly-covered eggs in the water. So a lot of our amphibians will lay their eggs in a vernal pool, which is a temporary pond. So the jelly covering protects the developing animal inside. And although amphibians do go through metamorphosis, their tadpole and larvae are still born able to function on their own and find food for themselves. So they don't need their parents after they are born. So our common snapping turtle is my example of one of our reptile mothers today. And the common snapping turtle mother is an example of an animal that does not care for her young after she lays the eggs and after they hatch. However, she does work incredibly hard to find the best spot to lay her eggs. So she lays them in late spring or early summer, and we generally see snapping turtles on land in June, as that's when they've emerged from their pond habitat to bury their eggs in sandy soils. So it's important to be especially careful of these mothers and other turtles during this time of the year because they are coming out of hibernation, they are traveling to breed and traveling to find a good spot to lay their eggs. So she will use her sharp claws on her hind feet to dig a nest to incubate anywhere from 25 to 50 eggs, and then she'll cover them back up to hide them from predators. Unfortunately, snapping turtle nests are predated often by predators like raccoons and foxes, but those nests that make it and will hatch incubate for about 9 to 18 weeks, and then they will generally hatch between August and October. And at this point, the young hatch and they're on their own to take care of themselves. If they do hatch in a colder time of the year, so say October, young will hibernate in the nest and emerge in the spring when it's warmer and easier for them to find food. So I actually took both of these photos here, one in the Adirondacks and one in Albany. So you can see mom is laying her, her eggs here. You can see one of the eggs coming out. Snapping turtle eggs are more round, whereas a lot of our other turtle species out here have more oval shaped eggs. And then, like I said, this mother in Albany on the right side is laying her eggs on the side of the road there. So it is really important to be careful. So this is an up-close photo of a snapping turtle hatchling. And I just wanted to note that like I said, there isn't any parental care in the species. So if you do come across one of them on a nature walk, they are fine, they're okay. So we want to leave them be where they are. It actually can cause them more harm than good to bring them home with us. So although we care for our kids and we feel for this baby, he's on his own. His mom prepared him for adulthood. So our amphibian mother today is the marbled salamander. And marbled salamanders are one of 4 species of salamanders found on the South Fork known as mole salamanders because they spend the majority of their time underground. So while our native blue-spotted salamander, our tiger salamander, and our spotted salamanders, which are the other 3 species of mole salamanders, while they emerge from their burrows in late winter and early spring to breed and lay their eggs in temporary ponds, like I said, vernal pools, to then leave them without parental care, the marbled salamander is unique in that they breed in the fall and their mother cares for her eggs. So the females will lay anywhere from 50 to 200 eggs in a somewhat dry nest that she's constructed under leaf litter. And she'll lay that on the edge of the vernal pool. So vernal pools will dry up in the end of summer. So she's laying it on the edge of that, where that pool is. So the mother's presence is very important for egg survival. And what she does, like you see in this picture here, is she coils around the eggs to guard them. And then she will turn them periodically until rainfall fills the nest and the vernal pool. So this rainfall will then stimulate hatching and the larvae will be on their own and mom can leave. So then they are now up to their own devices, but mom will care for the eggs until they hatch. So next up we have our bird mothers. And our birds are a little more similar to our mammals in that they do provide a significant amount of parental care. So although they do lay eggs instead of giving live birth, but many species in birds will form monogamous pairs and the parents are more involved. So male parental care is actually very rare in a lot of animals, but with many bird species, both mom and dad will help out with raising the young and building nests. So depending on the bird species, they will have either precocial young or altricial young. So like we said, precocial is more developed. They can fend for themselves a bit more, whereas altricial, they require a lot of parental care and they're less developed. So here we have on the bottom left here, we have a parent feeding what are altricial young. They were born without feathers, but now they're starting to sprout those feathers. Down below, we have a mallard mother duck incubating and guarding her eggs. And then up top, we have the American oyster catcher, which is one of our summer migrants, our shorebirds out here, and they will give birth to precocial young. So the piping plover, you may have heard of the piping plover before. is one of our shorebird species that we see out here in the spring and summer, just like the American oyster catcher. And they are the reasons for all the fencing that we see out here to protect them and their nests. So they will arrive in late March and April, and that's when they start claiming territory, performing courtship displays, and that's when males and females will also start to pair up. But plovers do not have the typical nests that you see in a lot of other birds. They make what we call scrapes, which are pretty much just shallow dents in the sand. And mom will decorate them with little pieces of shell and rocks so that they camouflage a bit more. And then she will lay typically about 4 eggs that are kind of a sand camouflage color in that scrape. So this is a really great strategy for protecting eggs. It's really, really hard to see these nests, a little bit harder for predators to find them, but also maybe one of the reasons why we do have that, fencing up and why they need to be protected, because it's so hard to see them. Another cool thing that they do is that if danger is near, both parents will use an impressive distraction method known as the broken wing display. So we see that being done down here in the bottom right photo. I actually worked with plovers a few summers ago with the town of Southampton. So 3 out of 4 of these photos are mine. This broken wing display is a method for, that parents will use to look like a weaker, easier target for a predator, whether they think it's us or it's a raccoon or a crow or maybe a cat. They will try to take that predator, distract that predator and bring them away from their eggs or their chicks so that they can run away or that their nest is safe. But if the mother does lose a nest, she will make a few more attempts to nest, but usually this time only 2 to 3 eggs will be in the nest because it takes more energy to produce those eggs. But actually both parents in this case will take turns incubating the eggs for about the next 4 weeks until they hatch, and then they hatch into precocial young. So down below here we have this nest of 3 babies and 1 egg. You can see that they already have their feathers, their eyes are open. They all look a little bit tired because they just spend a good time majority of the day getting out of their eggs. But what's really cool with them is that mom will lay, when she's laying her eggs to prepare her nest, she lays 1 egg a day, but when they hatch, they generally hatch within an hour or 2 of each other. So we see that 3 have already hatched and they're waiting on their 4th sibling to arrive. And they have that sandy camouflaged coloring as well. So they're precocial, so they can feed themselves, they can run around on the beach, but they do stay around mom and dad for protection, and they will stay with them. And then about 4 weeks after they, hatch, they will learn to fly, which we call fledge. And then they still stay on the beach for about another month or so, and then that's when they all leave together as a family and they migrate south in August and September. And then I also want to point out this picture up on the top right. The mothers will also sit on their chicks just like they will on their eggs to protect them from predators and also to keep them cooler. So if it's a really hot day and you're walking down the beach and it's 90-something degrees and you maybe see a plover sitting down, she might be sitting on her chicks to keep them cool. I also found it important to note that piping plovers are endangered in New York State. And that's why you see them in all these fenced areas. They do require protection because their populations have been declining due to increased beach traffic and also predation from raccoons, cats, and even driving on with your car. And sometimes people will disturb fencing as well. I also want to quickly note that this is a least tern, and they do nest within the fencing that's up for plovers. It's up for the terns as well, but they are commonly mistaken for the piping plover. They nest in large colonies, so you see many more of them at a time, and they are a little more aggressive in defending their chicks. So they do kind of have a bad reputation, but they are different than our plovers. Our plovers will nest amongst those large colonies, but you see many, much more tern nests than you do see with plovers. So lastly, we'll just talk about some of our invertebrates. With invertebrates, it's a bit more of a broad generalization just because so many animals are invertebrates. But many of our invertebrates lay eggs, and we will see that in animals like our insects and gastropods like snails. Parental care is also very rare in many invertebrate species. So here are some examples of invertebrates. We have the Forbes sea star and the whelk snail, which you've likely seen in our touch tank if you've been to the museum. And then on the top left, we have a praying mantis egg case, and she attaches those eggs to twigs. So although parental care is rare in invertebrates, the wolf spider mother I thought was important to highlight because she is incredibly unique in that she does provide care to her young after they hatch. So spiders are another animal that are surrounded by generally negative stereotypes, and they have bad reputations, but they are incredibly diverse, and I think she's especially cool. She will carry her egg sac at the end of her torso or her abdomen around with her. So because of this, she will always have to keep her abdomen raised so that her egg sac doesn't drag on the ground, which seems very tiring, but she's actually still able to even hunt like this. And she will even make mend tears to her egg sac, which is pretty cool. So once her young hatch after a week or two, they will climb up her legs and pile on top of her abdomen like this picture you see here. I actually took this photo at Barcelona Beach. I saw her just walking along the sand like that with dozens of babies on her back. So she will carry them around with her for several weeks until her offspring grow big enough to be on their own and defend themselves. So wolf spiders are actually the only spiders known to carry their offspring on their back like this. That's a pretty hardworking mom. So with that, that's the last mother that we have today. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Rachel, Melanie here. We do have a couple questions in the chat. The first one, if I see a turtle in the road, what should I do?
So it depends on the turtle, but you want to make sure that you move them in the direction that they're going, because they always have a place that they're going. So you want to make sure that you move them in the direction they're facing. If it's a box turtle or a painted turtle, it's fine to just pick them up. But if it's a snapping turtle, you really want to be careful because they have a really long snake-like neck that they can bend back and potentially bite you. So you can pick them up by the end of the shell, it's kind of like two handles on either side of the tail to pick them up so that and hold them far away from the body so that they can't reach you. If you're uncomfortable with that, I would maybe call a wildlife rehabilitation center just to get a little bit more guidance. But it's really important not to drag a snapping turtle by their tail because it can hurt their back.
Okay, one more question. Do birds have one or multiple broods of young during the breeding season?
So with our shorebirds, they will have one. They will make multiple attempts, like I said, if they do lose eggs, but they will just have that one brood.
Okay, we have a piping plover question.
Okay.
Did the piping plovers nest successfully at Jessup's Neck? I guess this is from last year.
I'm not sure about that because I wasn't on the team last year, but I know that the town of Southampton does have reports up. So you can, I think for the last several seasons, if you go on their website, you can find it pretty easily, or you can call the town of Southampton and they will have yearly reports on success rates of the plovers and terns.
Okay, and if you're interested in that, if you ask that question, you can of course email us at info@sofo.org and we can provide some more information. One more question, can people feed ducks? We see people feeding bread to ducks. Is bread bad for them?
Yeah, there are signs up that it's not good for them at certain areas. You might see that at Otter Pond in Sag Harbor. So you want to make sure that you're not feeding them anything that they wouldn't have in the wild. So bread is bad for ducks, yes.
All right, I think that's all the questions we have for today.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you learned something new about our animal mothers of the South Fork. Our next program, entitled Turtle Time, will take place on Tuesday, May 19th at 4 p.m. with our environmental educator, Jackie. So you can find a complete schedule of our upcoming programs and register on our website. You can also follow us there on Facebook and on Instagram for news on SOFO and on the natural world. And then also, if you have any additional questions about today's program that come to you later, please feel free to email us at info@sofo.org. Stay safe, everyone, and happy Mother's Day.